watching the Hub Network. The Studio Show. People, community, progress. Here is your host, Joe Kennedy.
Well, hi, everybody. I am Joe Kennedy, and welcome to the Studio Show. We're glad you're with us today, and got a few things in store for you today. Plans changed a little bit, but we'll get to that in just a second. But glad to have you with us, and we're glad to be doing the relaunch of the Studio Show, which started three or 4 weeks ago, I guess, with the Chief of Police, Chuck Claxton, came in, and Nick, Deputy Chief, as well. And we were glad to have them in studio, and so thank you very much to all the guests we've had, Holly Tishner and so forth. We've had a candidates forum since then as well. We hope you've been watching that online and hearing the stances of the candidates. We're going to get into that a little bit more later on. First thing I want to talk about, though, today is the Stuckey family benefit and kind of how everything came down there. And I understand from talking with Joe Bickle yesterday that they were able to raise just under $150,000 for the Stuckey family. And that is, of course, very important for them. Tragic loss of Tyler Stuckey there just a few weeks ago. And we certainly, our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to that family as well. Joe said there is still a way to donate to them and to help them out if you feel like doing so. I'm going to put this graphic on the screen right here for you. And that is the way to donate. If you can catch that on your phone and donate directly to Jovi there, Stuckey, and that's a way to send your love to them. And anything helps. I would probably say that anything goes a long way. So $5 or $10 or $20 or $100 or $1,000 or $10,000, if your heart so feels that way, donate to them. And so we know that they've been. They know that the community has surrounded them and lifted them up a little bit. And that's a good thing. So if you wish to donate, please donate to that. That's a very worthwhile place to put your money, for sure. When we come back, we'll talk about, as we get started here this morning, we'll talk about a few different things. Where my guest is at the moment, I'm not quite sure either, but we'll find out here in just a little bit. It was supposed to be Charlie Hickman in the studio. We'll talk about that when we come back. So stay with us on the Studio Show.
We'll be right back.
The Studio Show is brought to you in part by Stillwater Transfer and Storage and AAA Self-Storage. Welcome to the Music Loop. Always wanted to be a better musician? Learn the piano or keyboard? For only $10, you can join our pre-lesson event and find out if the Music Loop is right for you. Learn to play any song in any key. Accompany a vocalist or play with a band. Follow us on Facebook. The Music Loop. Putting you in music.
At Davis Dental Studio, our patients are our friends. Unlike the big commercial facilities, Davis Dental Studios wants you to know you're not just a number. We strive to bring personal and quality service to each patient. Dr. Rebecca Davis has over 18 years of experience as a caring and compassionate dentist. She and her highly trained staff will make sure your visit is a positive one. So remember, when you and your family need dental care, Davis Dental Studio. You're not just a patient, you're a friend.
In my mind, I was never going to walk right again. Before we were through, we had walked 23 steps. And that was my first steps of freedom. This patient is saying thank you.
Bank of Cushing, a branch of Blue Sky Bank Pawhuska, wants you to know they are still the same friendly hometown bank. Local people that live, work, and worship right here in Cushing. Providing you the same great service, more convenient products and technology, making your local banking experience even better. A great bank, serving a great community. Bank of Cushing, a branch of Blue Sky Bank Pawhuska.
Since 2003, Pro Events has had one singular focus: great audio, video, and lighting systems. Never confusing our industry with the PC crowd, Pro Events always provides you with the best. most reliable options for your house of worship, school, or corporate training facility. Make your system stand out from the crowd. And remember,
for the best AV, you know where to go. Visit proevents.pro.
The Studio Show is brought to you in part by Stillwater Transfer and Storage and AAA Self-Storage.
And that is the way that you can participate in the Studio Show, the studioshow102@gmail.com. And that gets an email sent to us, and we'd take any suggestion that you, of somebody you want to have on the show, or maybe some subject you want to cover, and we'll look into that. We were pretty much booked up all the way through pretty much May, middle of May right now. And that brings me to where in the world is Charlie Hickman today? Charlie Hickman is not with us. He couldn't be with us today at the very last minute. He found out that he had to work out of town, and that is the plight of a working musician, right? When you're trying to make it in the world of music, you got to hold down a day job, and Charlie certainly has to do that. And he had to be gone out of town for work today, and so he could not be here with us. So we told Charlie we would certainly rebook him and extend that invitation. We couldn't get him back in until about May 10th, but that is when that's going to happen. And so look forward to Charlie Hickman coming up. We'll have a little bit of his music and talk to him about how that's worked out so far. We had him a long time ago back on Donna and Friends, back when we were doing that in, 15, 16, I can't recall exactly, but it's a ways back there, a few years back, and we might even show some clips of that when Charlie was on that first time. And it's just an incredible difference between what he was doing then and what he's doing now, and the experience he's had in between. And we'll talk a little bit about that, where he's played, some of the things he's done down in Texas and whatnot, and all over. So we'll ask him about those experiences and see how he's liking it so far. I mean, that can be a tough life as well, but I'm sure the bottom line for all of that, being a musician myself, I know that you're doing what you love to do, right? So anyway, Charlie, thank you for letting us know that you couldn't be here today, and I'm sorry that we couldn't bring him to you as we planned on, but we'll have him on May 10th, so mark that down on your calendar and stay on the Studio Show Facebook page, and we'll keep you up to date. What we thought we would do today, since we kind of had to pivot very quickly here, was maybe revisit a couple of things. We put out a very unscientific poll the other day on Facebook on what's happening in Cushing, and a lot of members there, and got a lot of feedback on it, and probably still getting some feedback on it, some that I haven't even been able to read in the last few days. But the poll was interesting. It just asked, had about 14 items on there. What do you think the priorities should be for commissioners running in this cycle to tackle in their next term, or the next several months coming up at City Hall? And I think the poll came back about like I would expect it to. We broke up infrastructure into a couple of different items there. City streets was one. We broke out water and sewer, and we broke out power, all three differently. And not surprisingly, that all three of those were the top suggestions for everyone. We'll call them suggestions because, it is an unscientific poll that we took here. Just wanted some feedback on it. But basically, it's going to work out pretty much the same way that probably a scientific poll would work out in actuality, because infrastructure is one of the big issues that we've been dealing with here in Cushing. Of course, we've talked about the construction going on Main Street. In years past, we've talked about the development of the intersection there at Harmony Road, and is that going to have a stoplight and all that kind of stuff. All that's still coming up. And before I get too deep into that, I'm going to mention to you that next week is Terry Brandon coming in, and so a lot of these same questions about these projects are going to be posed to Terry. I'm excited about having Terry in here. We've been able to talk a lot the last couple of weeks and kind of visit about things that are going on, and so he's going to be able to articulate some of that back to you, and we're going to talk about this exact information and kind of how it pans out here, and some of the differences that we see, and some of the stances that we see from the two candidates running this year as well. And I think it is very important for the viewers and the voting public out there to educate themselves, avail themselves to the information as much as they can before they make their voting choice on April 4th for City Commission. It's really the only thing on the ballot. There's nothing else to bring you out other than the City Commissioner's race, really, that affects the city proper here. So we would encourage you to get out to vote, make your voice heard, and vote on April 4th. But we do kind of want to take a look at infrastructure issues and kind of how the stance on the two candidates is the same and in some ways different. And so we'll let you decide that as we play some of those clips for you here today. We'll kind of cue them up and maybe talk about them just a little bit. There are some differences, even though city politics is a lot the same. It's about filling potholes and keeping the power on and moving forward. There are some things that are forward-looking, and I kind of want to start with looking backwards, though, to a few years ago and kind of where we were as a city. And I think before Terry Brandon was the city manager or named the city manager, things were really very different. And I think it's good for us to kind of re-educate ourselves on what that difference was and what it looked like back in not more than 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And I think a big struggle was, one, the Main Street project should have been done then. It should have been being worked on back then, but nobody was pushing for it. Nobody was pushing the state, ODOT, to move forward on that project. We were not doing the things we needed to as a city to that they asked us to do to make that happen. And so things were kind of at a stalemate. Progress was not being made, and people will tell you, that's probably a reason why economic development has been tough, to be honest with you, the last few years. Although in light of that, I would say in the last several years, though, we made some changes. Economic development came to land with the Economic Development Foundation and works within those parameters of the foundation, kind of within the city, semi-pseudo within the city. Bruce there at the city, and we'll have Bruce on the show as well at some point, kind of when we get out of the political season, when it's not so, all the hot topics aren't quite as relevant maybe, and he can speak a little more freely to some of these issues. We'll have him on the show as well to speak to that. But you can look at the need for a grocery store out on Main Street and the need for business development out there, and people wonder, are we doing anything about that? Well, the candidates forum will tell you a little bit about that because we asked those questions of the current sitting commissioner, Ricky Lofton, and we also asked, Mr. Beasley, Jeff Beasley, what he would do in those situations too. So there's some interesting answers there. So please look at that and avail yourself. We're going to take some clips today here in a little while to kind of talk about these things that are big in this unscientific poll that we took on Facebook, and really give you a little bit of insight on how those things work, what the candidates want to do, what the candidates see as the priorities within the priorities, and how that has to move forward, and we'll change things as we go down the road. So, but when we come back, I'm going to revisit a little bit about what we looked like in those past years regarding economic development, what's changed, what hasn't changed, things that are still the same, things that need to move forward, things that need to progress, and things that we're kind of having to recover from. I'm going to visit a little bit with you about that. So we'll tackle a couple of those, and then we're going to hear some clips from the candidates on these infrastructure issues. So a little different show today than we planned on, but we thank you for being with us. We hope that you'll find it informative, and above all, go out and make your voice heard on April 4th. We'll say that a number of times today, so we can't encourage you enough to go out and do that. So anyway, stay with us here. We'll come back. We're gonna talk about that a little bit, and we're gonna play some clips of these candidates. So stay with us here, and we're glad that you're watching the Studio Show. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
The Studio Show is brought to you in part by Stillwater Transfer and Storage and AAA Self-Storage.
Well, hello, Whitney. How
Hello,
are you?
John. So here's the proposal packet for the new mobile app.
As long as I'm running this thing, there ain't gonna be no mobile app.
Introducing the new mobile app, making your banking experience even easier. It's so easy, even John can use it. Bank of Cushing, a branch of Blue Sky Bank, Pawhuska.
We have a help tab if you need help. We will have...
I won't need help. I'm pretty good at chess.
You are good at this.
Since 2003, Pro Events has had one singular focus: great audio, video, and lighting systems. never confusing our industry with the PC crowd. Pro Events always provides you with the best, most reliable options for your house of worship, school, or corporate training facility. Make your system stand out from the crowd. And remember,
For the best AV, you know where to go visit proevents.pro.
Welcome to the Music Loop. Always wanted to be a better musician? Learn the piano or keyboard? For only $10, you can join our pre-lesson event and find out if the Music Loop is right for you. Learn to play any song in any key, accompany a vocalist, or play with a band. Follow us on Facebook, The Music Loop, putting you in music.
When you have a team of physicians and nurses that really truly care about their patients, that translates into patient care.
It's a small practice, it's a small town. Everybody really takes that time to put the patient first.
Everybody cares what's happening to me and that I'm making progress and I'm gaining my freedom back and my mobility back. This patient is saying thank you.
At Davis Dental Studio, our patients are our friends. Unlike the big commercial facilities, Davis Dental Studios wants you to know you're not just a number. We strive to bring personal and quality service to each patient. Dr. Rebecca Davis has over 18 years of experience as a caring and compassionate dentist. She and her highly trained staff will make sure your visit is a positive one. So remember, when you and your family need dental care, Davis Dental Studio. You're not just a patient, you're a friend.
RCB Bank is more than a transaction. We work to make your life easier. We help build your business. We finance your dreams. We grow your legacy. We build relationships with our communities. Come in to find out why our customers always say, RCB Bank. That's my bank.
And we are back here on the studio show. Thank you for watching today as well. We want to go over this poll a little bit, get into this a little bit. Unscientific poll, I keep calling it a poll, but it really is just a toss it out there on Facebook, and you responded no matter whether you lived in Cushing, whether you lived outside of Cushing, but most people stated that they do business here in Cushing, or they come to Cushing often, or Cushing is kind of the center of their world a little bit, and so they're interested in what happens here in Cushing. And I said before the break that we'd go back and kind of revisit where we were just a few years ago, and it wasn't too long ago that we were having a lot of the same debates, and a lot of it was on economic development. And I can remember when, for example, Everett Roster and Jim Hogreef and some of the other commissioners were on the commission at that time. Big discussion about, can we get a hotel? Can we get a hotel to land here in Cushing? Well, we did. We did get a hotel, the Best Western, right down there on the corner, and they're here. And we're at now. There's a second hotel out by Mazzio's, behind Mazzio's, out by the Baptist Church out there too, where a lot of new construction has gone on. That's an improvement. There's been a lot of construction on Main Street. Continues to be a lot of construction on Main Street as far as buildings and new buildings and that sort of thing. Those are good, positive things that have happened in Cushing. The new hotel, I think that's, if I say this incorrectly, I can be corrected next week maybe with Terry, but a Holiday Inn Express or something like that, I think, is the hotel going in out there on Main now, being built now. But a lot of other, the optometrist office, the new Pizza Hut, all these new buildings that have been renovated, and you've seen the old buildings be taken over by other businesses. Las Molcajetes, the Mexican restaurant, I want to call it Mexi Hut because it's in the old Pizza Hut building. It's kind of what we nicknamed it. But anyway, but they've reused those buildings. Those buildings are not just abandoned. Other businesses have moved in there and made use of those. Atwood's, just like Atwood's, making use of the old Walmart building. A lot of, the one thing we miss out there in that area of town where that old shopping center used to be is the grocery store. We don't have Escott's anymore. And Harry, if if you're watching or listening, know that everybody misses that. I'm sure you've been through your guilt trip on that, but we understand you've retired and moved on. We get it. We all want to do that at some point ourselves. But for Cushing to have that grocery store is a big deal. There's been a lot of talk about that and a lot of work done on it in the last couple of years. But again, understanding what's going on with that property, I don't know how the property ended up, but a gentleman in New York City owns that, and the problem with that property out there is that they don't really care about what goes on here in Cushing. They're thousands of miles away. It's a simple investment property for them. They look at it as a line item on a spreadsheet or on a report from their accountant, and they say this is an opportunity to take a loss. If nobody's in there, then we're just writing it off and we're just taking the loss on it, and that's benefiting me that way. So they don't see the need for what the people want here in Cushing. They just see the need for the financial bottom line if you're in your office in New York City. And so that gentleman, I do not know the gentleman's name, I do not know the entity that owns that, but the understanding is that he has been involved in several negotiations of stores that see the need to put a grocery store in Cushing and to see that develop here in Cushing. Maybe not a huge grocery store, but at least something that will give competition to the larger corporate Walmart store. So that has been tried to be developed over the last several years, and it just has not been successful because mainly of the owner of the building. I understand now that the building is in quite a bit of disrepair. It's got mold and some things that are going to be very, very difficult and not very appealing for another building owner or a store owner to come in and fix. And that is where I think the city, in talking with the gentleman that owns the building there, the old Escott's building, to repair some of that and to get it up to readiness for a store to come in to clean it up and not let the store bear all the brunt of that coming in. That would be a big help. I also understand from talking to several people that there have even been large chains that have put down large amounts of money with the intention of coming in. We're going to put down $50,000 here and to show you that we're earnest in talking about putting a grocery store in there, and yet have not been able to do it because they can't get through the building issues with the owner in New York City. So that is an ongoing problem. It was the same problem we kind of had at one point in time with the depot down here at the end of Broadway. It was not owned by somebody in state. It was owned by somebody out of state. Actually, I'll correct myself. That was not necessarily the depot, but the old First National Bank building was owned by somebody out of state, I think in Washington or Seattle, Northwest. And therefore, we couldn't tear that building down. So finally, that was resolved, and so we were able to do that, which helped clean up downtown. Again, and that's a few years ago. So since then, people have been able to invest. Mr. Beasley himself has been able to invest, and I think that's well-deserved credit that he gets for doing that, taking an old building like the Duncan Theater, fixing it back up, putting a nice restaurant next to it and doing business there, and he continues to do that through town. One of the questions in the forum, I think you'll see if you watch that, to Mr. Beasley was, are you not more effective as a businessman in Cushing? Why do you feel like you need to be on the city commission in order to further that? And then how is that going to affect your decisions as you go forward? He'll answer that question as well. He takes a little bit of time to answer that. So all those things are pertinent and relevant to what we do here in Cushing. Main Street has been a big deal. It is a big, grinding, huge wheel of government that has to turn, and it turns very slowly. It turns very slowly for the city of Cushing. And so things that were issues 7 or 8 years ago are just now coming to fruition because we took the time 3 or 5 years ago to focus on those and to put a plan in place. And it takes time to recover from the deficits that we had from the previous city administration. We were so focused on having a fiscal balance sheet, a good, healthy fiscal balance sheet. There's nothing wrong with that. We didn't have much debt, and we didn't have anything really weighing us down financially. But what began to weigh us down as a community were all the deficits in infrastructure, all the deficits in roads, all the deficits in power and water, sewer, the lake, all these things that have now kind of passed their prime, and now we have to deal with those in a completely different way. And so that becomes very, very difficult to when you're talking about budget and money and how to raise money and how to tackle those problems. It just goes to show you that it complicates those issues. So the money that we saved years ago by ignoring those issues has not paid off. That has not been a good strategy. And we want to talk to, of course, Terry when he comes in next week. We want to mention that and see what his feelings on that are and what he has been strategically doing to move Cushing forward. Because it is a very large, heavy, cumbersome process to do that. City commissioners come and go. Different issues get hot and cold. But the plan still has to remain. And so we want to ask Terry about that and what his outlook for all of that is, and we will do that next week. Let's get to this infrastructure issue on the poll, and you can see on this unscientific poll, again, I want to say that is unscientific, but 20%, and that topped almost everything by quite a bit, except other infrastructure issues, as far as things that people were concerned about in or around Cushing. I think the thing that I was surprised the most about in this poll is that economic development was not very high on the list. It was not a big issue for those people that responded. And I think that is because people understand that before you do that, you have to tackle these other big issues. Before you can have something of great value to do business in, we have to have the basic needs and services met. We have a huge housing deficit as well as another issue here in Cushing, and the economy is not helping that move along any faster there either. So a lot of these issues have to be resolved as well as economic development. It can't be just economic development, although that can start to drive the train, but you still have to solve these issues. The bottom line is that we have to attack all of these issues with streets, the power plant, the water and sewer have to be dealt with in a way that is comprehensive and that is long-term. They have to have a long-term look. We can't just put a Band-Aid on it. We've been doing that for too many years. That's what happened to the city lake. We kept putting a Band-Aid on it, putting a Band-Aid on it, putting a Band-Aid on it, and eventually the Band-Aid broke. And that's why there's no longer any water in the lake out there. So that's a big issue, and it's a big, and I understand how it's a big issue for people because they have, duck hunters had space out there for years and years and enjoyed doing that, and it's a local and it's easy to get to and it's convenient and it's an entertainment issue. It used to be way back in the day a second source of water for Cushing, which I remember. I've lived here in Cushing now about 35 years, and I remember when the lake used to turn over and the water would turn a little bit brown. So we understood that, and that was always a problem. And then that, of course, we resolved that problem. But the lake was no longer the issue as a second water source. The turbidity in the lake was too much to overcome, and that is covered as well in the candidate forum. And I want to take just a minute before we get into this again here real quick in this candidate forum and these questions to the candidates. I want to thank J.D. Meisner for coming in, being a part of that, helping ask questions and helping sponsor, putting that on to you. I think it's a very important thing for those of us who can to team up and bring you more information about these things. And hopefully it gives you an opportunity to, not that it's the only source of information you have, but at least as a source of information, make your decisions about who should be voted for and who should be given elected office and awarded with elected office this April, and whose vision and plan has been good, either on the current plan we've been on or on maybe something different and new. So all of those are decisions that you have to make. Let's get right to this, though. And we'll do a couple of these, and we'll take a break and come back and close out. But this is on infrastructure, and obviously it's the biggest issue on the poll that we saw there. So we wanted to ask the candidates exactly what they thought the infrastructure issues were in Cushing. Let's take a look at that.
Talk about infrastructure. What is like the single most important priority that Cushing has for infrastructure today?
Today it's power, and that's self-inflicted. The fact that our power plant is in such disrepair, we have to make that a priority. We've got to make sure that that's being addressed. And backup water is one of the things that concerns me greatly. We do not have a backup water source. So those are the two things that I'm most concerned about. But what's on fire today? Electric. We need to repair our generators. Need to make those necessary repairs. What am I most annoyed by? What can I feel every day? The roads. I don't think we have great roads, and it can be embarrassing when people come to town. And I'm not talking about Main Street. I'm talking about all of our roads need some review.
What are the big infrastructure issues right now in Cushing that really needs more of the budget attention, needs more money put to it, but maybe we can't quite get to all that? What do you see those priorities as today?
Well, a classic example was a meeting we had a couple of months ago was streets. You know, our streets, we had these people come in and check our streets, and we're rated at 50% are in poor shape. And that's about 40 miles of street that needs to be run that are in poor shape. And it costs $1 million a mile to do streets. So we're talking about $40 million. Now that's the one right off the top of my head that, you know, I mean, we actually, you know, we have some work, our sewer plant and our water plant, they're working on the end of their service life. So at some point in time, these are things that's going to have to be addressed. Power plant, that is a big one also. I mean, it's actually past its service life. And we've had to do a lot of repairs up into the millions of dollars, you know, in the last couple of years. So how deep's the hole? I mean, how much money are you willing to put in it? And I'd actually heard, we were actually in an informal discussion, just me and another person was talking here a while back, said, well, how much does a new generator cost? 20 million. How many would it take to operate the city of Cushing? About 4. We're talking $80 million. So, and that's sort of mind-boggling in itself. But then you probably get to another deal where we have to take that to the vote of the people, because that's a large amount of money.
Well, there you have it on that issue, and that is the candidates basically saying the same thing that you all said in the poll, that again in the scientific poll, that water, power, and streets were the three big issues. And the reason why they remain to be big issues today is because we have ignored those in the past, and the candidates basically addressed that, saying that we have. Jeff said that it's basically self-inflicted that we're dealing with our power plant today because we refused to address that years ago. Again, back on Steve Spears' watch, we were focused on maybe saving money, but were we really saving money? The answer is no. The city of Cushing is not a bank, is not a place to save money. It is a place for people to live and in a city that has services that they're protected by fire, police, medical services, and that sort of thing. And so that's what we should be focused on. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be fiscally responsible. That doesn't mean we shouldn't understand and have creative ways to gain revenue and plan for revenue. We've used the 1 cent sales tax in the past to build some newer buildings. Not that they weren't needed. City Hall was in need of repair. City Hall and the police station, if we did some work in there, Pro Events did some work in there years ago, and it was in rough shape. And so that's much better today. We can move on and take that issue off the table because we had a plan, we paid for it, and we did it, and we moved on. But it's the same thing with all of these other issues. If we're going to repair the power plant, if we're going to repair all of the streets and catch up on 40 miles of a city streets, excuse me, in Cushing that need to be repaired, like Ricky said, that's $40 million, and that has to come from somewhere. He also mentioned that there are, there are things in the budget that restrict the use of funds to very specific projects, to very, the wording of those projects has to be very specific. The intent of those projects has to be very specific to take money out of a certain budget. The hospital authority, for example, can only use money that is allocated for health and wellness of the citizens of Cushing, and so that did help pay for the walking trails and some of those things going on there, which are good. Those are good for parks and recs and quality of life and those kind of issues here. But as you can see in that poll, that is not the things that we are dealing with in a big way. The things that we're dealing with in a big way probably affect the quality of life. You'd like the roads to be better. You'd like the power to be adequate. You'd like all that stuff to be the way it needs to be. But it is just in a state of we've ignored it for too long. And so the last several years, I know Terry Brandon has been focused on that. And I want to play another clip. I think in this clip that Rick tells a little bit about what Terry has been focused on as a sitting commissioner. He's a little more in the know as far as what goes on a day-to-day basis there with Terry. So let's listen to this next set of questions for these two candidates. Are we ever going to catch up? How are we going to catch up on the street issue and get that 40 miles of poor roads renovated and repaired?
I'm going to go into a little bit about the way the city works financially. The city of Cushing, what we get is sales tax dollars. And that's the way all municipalities operate in the state of Oklahoma. You get sales tax dollars, and that's just about it. We get enough sales tax dollars to actually operate like basic core services. When I'm talking to people you don't get any return on, you're talking about fire department, police department, youth center, blah, blah, blah. It's probably operates close to negative numbers. And how all of our capital projects are financed is through the Cushing Municipal Authority, which happens to be the electric and water and sewer. So these things have all financed all capital projects for some time. And what we're getting into now is inflation. It's not only affecting us all at home, but it's actually affecting what we're able to do also, because it's just eating up everything we're doing. And it's becoming a tough thing to make things balance. And in fact, actually this year, we're going to actually operate at close to a $4 million deficit, including the city of Cushing and the Cushing Municipal Authority. So, but we have enough cash reserves in the municipal authority to cover it because we wanted to do these capital projects. But we've also lost our co-payment for being able to produce electricity in half from not having all of our generators running and having to do repairs to the plant and these kinds of things. It just really eats up money quickly. And when we get up here in my world, in this job, we're talking hundreds of thousands or millions, and it don't take long.
So, as a follow-up, to repair the power plant, you're aware of the cost. Does the budget allow the city to bring the power plant back up to its original glory, or for lack of a better term, to its operating capacity? Let me put it that way.
Does the budget allow? I don't think the budget allows for it, but can we afford to do it? I think we can afford to do it. I'm aggressive when it comes to spending on the things that we need. If there's something we need, we're going to go find a way to make it happen. If we have to borrow money, we go borrow money. I'm proud that we have very little debt as a city, but at the same time, there are things like that you just don't mess with, and you do whatever it takes to make it right and fix it. Our reserves are deep. Our pockets are super deep on several of our reserve funds. We have one account that's in the, I don't want to say 80 million, but I think it's very, very close to that. So if it's not more than that. So I think that we can definitely stand to be more aggressive, say yes to more things that we know we need, and be a little less reserved. And I think it'll help us pay off, because the more aggressive we are there, the more people we have say yes to Cushing, increases our sales tax revenue, and increases our population, which all those things in turn make more revenue.
Well, Jeff brings up a couple of points in there that I think are important for voters to analyze and look at. One is, how aggressive should we be as a city in things that we need? And Rick brings up the same kind of points about these are all things that we have to strategically plan towards, because it takes a lot of money. It takes, you mentioned that the cost of a generator was $20 million and we need 4. That's $80 million. That's a lot of money. And so both candidates, I encourage you to listen to both candidates and make your decision based on what they're saying and kind of reading between the lines too. What are they telling you? What are they telling you here that we're doing or not doing? And some of that can be said. Some of that doesn't always get articulated exactly the way it wants to come out on these particular shows. So talk to the candidates. Go by and talk to them and ask them and educate yourself on these issues. Where are we at? What can we spend? What is the city budget? What do we spend every year? Lots of issues go into that, and more information is always better than less information, is what we always say here at the Hub Network for sure. Let's go on to the next one here. This is another question and answer session here by the candidates, and I believe it's going to have to do directly or indirectly with infrastructure in some way. Let's take a look at it. Are we ever going to catch up? How are we going to catch up on the... I apologize. That is the wrong... Get that 40 miles of poor roads. We'll get to the right one. Here we go. How do you see that?
Well, when we talk about power specifically, I am pro-solar. So I am also deregulation. So if you live outside city limits, you can't vote, you can't run for the commission. Well, I'm darn sure not going to be the guy to hold you on my utilities. So very controversial statement. Take it, run with it, attack me on it, because it's an interesting conversation to me, and it's something that should be debated. But from right now, from what I understand, if you're on our city power, we're not going to release you off of our city power. You're there. You're stuck. So it's not like your telephone, but you're not going to switch your long distance to MCI WorldCom. You're going to be stuck on Cushing's power with no say-so in the game. I'm for annexation. It's another big thing. And love me or leave me, that is an important part of making Cushing better. There's a lot of leadership. There's a lot of resources we have that live outside city limits that could really help us with that, and especially in conversations about utilities and how to fix those budgets.
What are the big infrastructure issues right now in Cushing that really needs more of the budget attention, needs more money put to it, but maybe... Well, I apologize, that clip, we've already seen that clip a little bit, and so I apologize for having that in there again.
Rick, example was a meeting we had at...
Sorry about that.
Our streets, we had these people come in and check our streets. And
would you pledge to say tonight that you would not use your office or your position on the city council to benefit yourself personally or in business?
I would not, because I believe in, we see all this stuff nowadays about people not being ethical in government. And I believe that we need to get back to the old school, people being ethics in government. I mean, I stand nothing to gain here. I have no interest in any businesses around town. I mean, I just get a salary where I work, no matter who comes in there. I get a straight salary, so it doesn't benefit me financially at all. And I love to see new businesses come into town. I'd like to see more services come to town. And believe it or not, we're working very diligently and to try to get these things here, and I'm a firm believer in ethics.
Do you think, though, with your amount of property ownership, that you can remain impartial and fair in any negotiations that might bring in additional economic development to the city? Do you think that will hinder your decisions any? Do you think it will cause you to reconsider maybe certain entities that want to come in and that sort of thing? How would you speak to that?
That's a great question. It's a question that I have for myself consistently. I keep myself accountable there. There will be times that I have to abstain. I think it'll be on a rare occasion that I actually abstain from voting, to be honest. The real estate that I purchased to develop, and I hand that real estate off often. I don't sit on real estate for long periods of time. We get folks in and get them moving forward. Up to this point, I don't know of a single incentive or benefit that the city has given any one of my tenants. So even with over 30 properties in the city, I'm not aware of one. And you may be able to tell me, I may go, oh, okay, yeah, that's true. But off the top of my head, Joe, I don't know of anywhere, even without being a commissioner, that's taken place.
And that, again, kind of a question that was asked to both candidates about being impartial and being able to remove themselves from any economic development decision on property they own. Of course, Rick and Jeff are really at two different sides of the spectrum on as far as ownership of property, and they're already developing in that. And I think that is one question that probably hits a little closer to home for Jeff than maybe it does for Rick, because Rick talked about, again, going back to the grocery store coming in, that part of the deal with the grocery store coming in was that an Ace Hardware go in next door. Well, Rick's answer to that, and you'll again watch the forums, and you will see that on there. We'll bring this out in clips as well later on. But he says that he welcomes competition in that area. He welcomes competition because it makes us better, and I think that's something that you need to listen to, and how he articulates that a little bit. But Jeff also has points as far as he's very aggressive as far as dealing with the property in town here, making it do something useful, that sort of thing. It's up to you to decide if that's a right now issue or if we have bigger issues in front of us. And so that's kind of the question right now. So both candidates obviously bring things to the table that Cushing can move forward with and think about, but it's up to you. It's up to the voter. And if we can say anything today here from the studio show, I would say to you is examine all of those issues. Examine the emotional issues. Some people are very emotional and very passionate about the Cushing Lake. What can we really do with that? I don't necessarily have an opinion on the Cushing Lake, because to me it would be, if we can use that as a backup water source, it has intrinsic value at that point. The fact that we can't use it as a backup water source means that it becomes just a recreational thing. And so that kind of moves it over from an infrastructure issue over to a economic development issue, and maybe even a little bit lower on the list of those priorities as far as economic development. So those things matter. Those things matter, how they're approached and how they're looked at and how they're dealt with. And I understand it's a very emotional issue because people have gone to the Cushing Lake for years and years and years, and there's a lot of fond memories out there, and there was a day when that was a very big part of life here in Cushing. But, you know, we've done a lot to change. Life has changed for people in the last 40 years, and it's a little bit different. We are now not really reliant on the refineries and the oil business that was here in town at one time, which we were so dependent on that. When they went away, it almost crushed Cushing completely. Tank farms, they're not going to move out of town tomorrow. That's the thing about that. And so that was probably an issue that was worked on for a long, long, long time. And that has paid off because it has helped build our school system. It has helped do some things that have been valuable to the community, improved quality of life, improved teachers. If you're in the Cushing School District, you're in one of the most well-funded school districts in the state. And that is something that Cushing should be proud of, because we see the results of that in the bond issues. A lot of that money that has come in through bond issues to pay for the buildings and the improvements that we have seen in the school system have been paid for not by individuals necessarily, but more by corporations and the tank farms and the bigger oil companies and that sort of thing. And that is something that not every community can say as well. So that has changed and that has improved in the last 5 to 10 years. So there are things that have the wheels have turned. The wheels have turned, whether we've wanted them to or not. On infrastructure, they've turned. And we've seen we're paying the price for some of that. On economic development, they have turned. And we're seeing the results and the benefit of some of that as well. And I think our direction has not been horrible at all. I think we've had a very focused, we've been dealt a set of cards. We've been dealt some cards that we've had to deal with. And we're still, because the city government wheel turns slowly, we're just now seeing some light at the end of the tunnel on some of these infrastructure issues, and not a whole lot of light on some of them. We're still working towards towards them. And that's what we hope to hear from Terry Brandon, city manager, next week when he comes in here. We're going to talk about these things. We may even have some more clips for him to specifically address and maybe raise more questions than answers, and so he can address some of that and talk about it. But I think what we have to look at as a community here is, has our plan been the right plan, for one, and have we been effective in executing that plan as another? And I think that's a big focus change that we made as a community maybe 8 years ago or 7 years ago, 6 years ago, and we're seeing some results of that. So now, what is the next step? Now, what do we do to further that? Do we stay on the same path and just be consistent and watch the results of that start to manifest themselves and start to come to fruition here in Cushing, or do we change paths again and go a different way? I think it's difficult sometimes to make the knee-jerk reaction and operate that way. We have to be very planned, very specific, very intentional in our thinking, and I think you're going to see from Mr. Brandon next week that we have been doing that very well. And we probably wouldn't agree on all of that, on everything for everybody, but we have been trying to click those issues off the list a little bit, and the more we do that, the more that gets out of the way of an infrastructure issue, and we solve that in the long term, and then we can focus on more of the short-term issues on where to spend our funds on buildings and economic development and improving quality of life here in Cushing. But like Ricky Lofton said, we don't have anything if we don't have our infrastructure, and I think and I think both candidates probably feel that way as well. So I don't want to put words in any one specific candidate's mouth, but that is what I've seen from this candidates forum. I think they have a pretty good understanding of the issues. They have a little different approach, and they want to see maybe what they feel are different results from those approaches. But again, this is what I would say to you. Please go out and vote on April 4th and make your voice heard. You go out and say, this is an important issue to me. This is why I'm voting for Mr. Lofton. This is why I'm voting for Mr. Beasley, either way. And you make your voice heard, and you help put that plan into effect. And then if you have questions for Mr. Brandon next week, send them in to thestudioshow102@gmail.com. We'll maybe accumulate some of those, and we'll ask those questions next week. But he'll be right here in studio with us, and we look forward to that. A lot of other things coming up. We've got head football coach Rusty Morgan coming up in a few weeks, CHS band director Danny White. We've got a couple questions for him, like what's he going to be doing next year? We don't really know. We're going to ask him, and we're going to ask a lot of different questions of people like that. We're hoping to get maybe Belinda Flynn in here as well. If you see her out and about, tell her we're trying to get a hold of her. We've been sent a few emails, but we haven't heard back from her. So let her know that we're trying to hunt her down. And then, of course, we'll have also, we got some surprises in store for you, too. Maybe some, tickle your ears with a WWE, somebody that's pursuing the WWE and what that's like for them. So some different people like that. You're going to get a whole lot of different things from the studio show here. But for today, we're sorry we didn't have Charlie in here. We'll have him back on May 10th, and he'll give us some of his music and what he's up to. So until next week, next Wednesday at 10:30, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you for watching The Studio Show. People, community, progress.